Wall Street, the epicenter of American corporate power. Capitalism still has many admirers here. The Occupy Wall Street camp in Zuccotti Park has been empty for weeks, cleared of its tents. But on this freezing Manhattan morning in early December, a few people are beginning to gather again.
The task ahead is impossible. But just because it's impossible doesn't mean it's not inevitable. Because it's impossible, it's inevitable. We have to break down everything we know.
The camp may be gone, but those who've been driving the movement forward are still there.
It's gonna be better. It's gonna be stronger. It's gonna be more organized. We're gonna work towards that. Trust us. Have faith.
But even before Zuccotti was emptied, the question was always, could the movement continue to grow? Or would its voice be drowned out in the noise of a US presidential election? Fault lines followed some of Occupy Wall Street's key organizers as it fought to stay relevant over the winter months. It's the middle of December and Occupy Wall Street is searching for a new home. So today they've come to one of the largest landowners in New York City, the church.
We're coming to you for sanctuary. The church, based on economic and social justice and compassion and love, stuff that we were trying to build amongst each other because of the feelings of alienation, and these are not abstract.
Trinity Church owns billions of dollars of real estate in the city, and portions of that property sit vacant. The protesters, along with some supportive clergymen, are asking Trinity to allow them to use the space.
Are we saying no to a conversation about you allying with us in public space?
I think we said we started the conversation, the quiet conversation.
Amin Hussein knows that without an open public space, the movement will lose one of its greatest strengths: visibility.
And I'm asking you, take 2 steps out of your comfort zone and recognize that these are moments in history that don't come every now and then.
For weeks, Amin and this group of Occupy Wall Street organizers have repeatedly asked the church to grant them the space.
Is that we're really clear that the no is a no to the private property.
Right.
Every time they've asked, Trinity has said no. So now they're planning more direct action to take it over. Occupy Wall Street is a non-hierarchical movement.
Cool.
But Amin and Sandra Nurse have been at its forefront. They were at the very first Occupy Wall Street gathering. And since then, their lives have revolved around trying to sustain the momentum.
I see other people in other countries who are in way worse conditions, who are able to organize and mobilize at very large scales. And I don't see that happening here, and it's like, I don't get it.
Are you using your own phone or using this phone?
No, I'm using this phone for comms. So
On the morning of the takeover action,
so that's that.
they're making last-minute preparations for the day ahead.
This phone is also a backup.
Is it kind of unpredictable? Just like, I mean, do you never really know what kind of turnout there's going to be, and it's just kind of the moment?
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
You don't know. And it's not about, it's not about success and failure. It is about failing. You're trying to change a system. You're going to fail multiple times. But I think it's also how you define success and failure. And I think part of being in something like this is to change the equation. Is to change the way you do math. It's for people to get involved. And the more people get involved and the more people believe, the more progress you're made.
This will be the first major action since tens of thousands took to the streets of Manhattan on November the 17th, 2 days after Zuccotti Park was cleared.
Sisters and brothers!
Sisters and brothers!
We are building up a new world!
The police have been monitoring all of Occupy Wall Street's actions. The day gets off to an ominous start. They're quick to detain and arrest Zach, one of the organizers, on a warrant for a previous incident.
Do not waste your energy on the police. That is not our battle. Our strength is coming together. We are a community.
We think this is the point when something is going to happen. We believe some of the protesters are going to try to get over the fence and into the area that they're trying to occupy and make a new encampment for Occupy Wall Street right here.
The first to climb the fence, retired Episcopal Bishop George Packard.
Well, there's already about 50 people who climbed this ladder to get into this space and are now occupying the area that they've been speaking about for weeks.
As soon as the perimeter fence is breached, the NYPD move in.
You see the fence behind me is now starting to come down. The police are pushing through and the protesters are also trying to get onto Trinity Plaza. There's a lot of force being used right now. It's starting to get violent.
The police wasted no time arresting those who'd broken through. Almost 50 people were taken into custody, including the members of the clergy who'd taken part. Over 6,500 people have been arrested across the US during Occupy actions. While the protesters hadn't achieved their main aim, to establish a new physical camp, they say this action showed that the movement was very much alive.
I think you see it. The energy's there, and they know that it's dangerous and that it involves arrests, and they do it. That's a sign.
But any way you look at it, a few hundred people was a far cry from the tens of thousands who came out a month ago to protest the clearing of Zuccotti Park. The action also failed in its ultimate objective, finding a new home for the movement. An aim that some say could become a distraction for Occupy Wall Street.
In many instances, it was the way that the evictions happened ended up bolstering the movement. We had to figure out what are we doing about space. Are we taking over new space? Are we reimagining what space means and decentralizing and taking over multiple spaces rather than centralizing one individual space? We are now rethinking what this means and trying to figure that out moving forward.
While discussions about the importance of space for the movement went on through the winter, perhaps something more important was happening across the United States. This is a neighborhood called East New York in Brooklyn. Alfredo Carrasquillo, Tasha Glasgow, and their 2 children had been in and out of homeless shelters for years.
I want to thank, first off, this community.
Occupy moved him and his family into a vacant home, just one of the 5 million lost to foreclosure since 2006.
We break into them and we move people without homes into homes that don't have people.
We are taking back our houses.
And we feel that that is our way of doing a couple of things. One is challenging land relationships the way they were, but the other is intentionally breaking the laws that we think are immoral, that defend the right of corporations to maintain hundreds of thousands of vacant homes, while there are hundreds of thousands of human beings who need homes sleeping out on the street.
East New York has 5 times the foreclosure rate than the average in all of New York State.
Nalini Stamp, an activist who's faced eviction herself after her family's home was foreclosed on, has been at the forefront of Occupy's housing actions.
Housing is a right!
If these things start to happen more often, where we're connecting it to an issue like housing, but also do like the foreclosure actions and do bank actions, that's what is a movement. That's what a movement is. It's like hitting it up from every single direction.
Over 24 cities across the US participated on this day of action called Occupy Our Homes. And the same thing was going on in Oakland, in California's Bay Area.
There has been no pressure on developers to provide affordable housing. So they've abandoned us in terms of housing. And so the Occupy movement has put a highlight on that because so many people have been affected.
Nell Myand is a housing activist who worked with Occupy to take over this home in West Oakland on the National Day of Action.
So young people have been affected in terms of their parents being foreclosed on and their grandparents being foreclosed on, in terms of them not being able to afford housing, right? So there are a whole set of ways that we've all been impacted across the board. And so the moment has arrived.
When we visited the property, it was housing for young people who couldn't afford a roof over their heads. It had become a space where they could sleep, meet, and organize.
The foreclosure crisis is so bad, it's so severe, and it's so obvious that the police, local and national, did nothing to arrest the people who caused the crisis and who caused homelessness. It would seem very odd and very heavy-handed then for the police to turn around and arrest the people who are trying to solve the crisis by moving people into vacant homes or preventing people from getting evicted in the first place.
But that's exactly what has happened. Just 2 weeks after we visited, the house was raided by police and 12 of its occupants were arrested. Oakland has been at the forefront of Occupy. Its actions among the most militant and ambitious in the movement.
Yeah, we need to go a little bit faster because it's totally possible we're going to just pulled over by Homeland Security. We can't just roll through there.
Jack and Baruka are scoping out the port.
We need to figure out where the longshoreman parking is.
It's the 5th largest in the United States, generating $8.5 million a day.
Talking about blockading this much of the economic apparatus up and down the coast is pretty insane.
Occupy Oakland plans to shut it down.
So even if the police are blocking off the entrances, we're going to drop people at that police line.
They're aiming to mobilize thousands of people, and they're in touch with organizers in several port cities all along the West Coast who are hoping to follow their lead.
We're pretty sure they're going to stop the shuttles. And the buses.
But if they do, then we just get out. Like I said,
hope we get close as possible.
Close as possible.
The investment bank Goldman Sachs owns a major interest in a company that operates the terminals here. Occupy activists believe that the best way to hurt the 1% is to take aim at their profits.
In the civil rights movement, something that was really successful was pinpointed economic boycott. Same thing with the anti-apartheid movement. So we're trying to strategically, bring the occupation movement into something that has more teeth, which is pinpointed economic blockade, spread over an entire geographical area and coordinated between all these different cities and stuff like that.
Mike check!
5 a.m. and it's the beginning of the port shutdown.
Well, this crowd of around 50 to 60 demonstrators is now being joined by the entire demonstration. Now they've just arrived at the port terminals as reinforcements to make sure the blockade stays in place and that the functioning of the port is shut down.
We've got 200 people there right now, and we just want to beef it up.
Boots Riley, a musician and an Occupy Oakland organizer, is helping to coordinate to make sure every entrance to the port was blocked.
They need backup at the other gate. They need 50 people. They don't have quite 50 people going with them. We need some more folks to go along.
Activists needed a large enough crowd so that police would be unable to clear them away.
You see the police officers have just burst through the picket line. They're now lining up behind the protesters. There's a bit of tension here. There's been some pushing and shoving, and it seems the atmosphere is getting a little tense.
The police ultimately did not break up the picket line. A few thousand protesters, Occupy activists and union members were able to shut down the ports.
We got that call. We shut down the morning shift.
To be clear, longshoremen are going home now. Effectively, the Port of Oakland is shut down.
So Vancouver is
stores shut down. Portland, San Diego, they're taking arrests.
Why do you think Oakland is such a strong Occupy movement? What is it about Oakland that makes it such a...
Well, it's the type of organizer that we have. Most of the folks involved in this are not getting paid to be organizers and have not had our politics shaped by, you know, foundation grants or anything like that. Our politics are shaped by only by us having a vision of building a movement that can actually affect change.
Well, this movement might be only 2 months old, but they've managed to coordinate a shutdown on one of the biggest ports on the West Coast. And it's not just here in Oakland where they've just declared victory. In Vancouver, and in Portland, in Longview, and in cities across the region, there are major ports that have been effectively shut down and coordinated by the Occupy movement.
Come on, bam! Yo, from Wall Street to Walmart to Warman, the globe up the factory forming like put another dealer. Some mama's getting door knives. His son ain't never coming home. You rule by warlocks, oil money, and student loans.
While Occupy movements across the country have been criticized for having a largely white male demographic, we found the picture to be more complex.
And so we say people, not profit. We stand with workers, not capitalists. We are for education and housing, not prisons and police.
I was beaten, hogtied, carried to a hospital. Then they turned around and said that they knew nothing about excessive force happening to me.
Here in Oakland, the organizers come from a background of protesting against police brutality towards young people of color.
I love what I see.
Love you. I love you.
But let's not do this in vain. Let's continue until the change is made.
I'm 49 years old, and I've always felt like I was the 99%. I felt that my parents were the 99% before this, and I felt, especially in the black community, for 400 years, they've always been the 99%.
If you look across that crowd, you'll see, you know, black folks, Latino folks, Asian folks, Arab, Persian folks, you know, being involved, and people that know each other.
It's changed for whites because whites were never experiencing what black people have experienced. So now that they're getting the experience, they're coming out fighting.
That widespread anger has helped Oakland mobilize the numbers to carry out large-scale actions. After blocking the morning shift, protesters came out again in the afternoon to make sure the ports remained closed.
The protesters are now back to shut down a major port terminal for the second time today, and it looks like the crowd is even bigger than it was this morning. And some have said this is a low point for the movement, that now encampments are being cleared around the country, the movement could start to fade. Well, Oakland seems to be the answer to that.
The port shutdown was also a show of solidarity with unionized dock workers. While the union leadership refused to give official support, many of its rank-and-file members stood on the picket lines. The relationship between the Occupy movement and unions and political groups with ties to the Democratic Party has been a complicated one.
Labor has an agenda. They want Obama elected. So they're going to give you stuff, right, to use your name up until that point.
This is a revolution, not a sleepover. Get ready for the march!
That divide was evident when the unions came to Washington, D.C. in early December, armed with Occupy Wall Street slogans. Despite freezing rain, thousands marched in a day of action that was coordinated by SEIU, the largest union in the United States. The Occupy movement has been wary of aligning itself with unions, even when working towards similar goals like removing corporate money from politics.
You can see some of the language here about 99% and taking back the capital, occupying Washington, is some of the language that the Occupy movement has been using. These are union marches, and the fear that the occupiers have is that their movement is being co-opted by groups with a political agenda.
There's certainly a tension. I think that there's a lot of us who are uncomfortable with what will be the electoral strategy of the unions, and there's a conversation waiting to happen that hasn't really happened in the best way yet about what it means to work together.
Let's get together, people! Why are we having this stupid divide? Come on!
It's a dilemma at the heart of Occupy. While unions' influence and numbers are in decline, they still have the ability to mobilize their members by the thousands.
Real solidarity is actually honoring the different places we need to be and moving people further and further along, right? So for a lot of the rank and file members from the unions, they took over lobbies today in ways they may have never done. Some of the people had never been arrested before. These are forms of transformation, right?
By staying outside traditional arenas, Occupy Wall Street has already succeeded in changing the political discourse.
You go to Iraq and they arrest you!
The debate has changed significantly, even though in his 2012 State of the Union address, Barack Obama did not mention Occupy by name. He clearly spent the vast majority of time articulating the idea that inequality is harmful for society.
Now, you can call this class warfare all you want, but asking a billionaire to pay at least as much as his secretary in taxes? Most Americans would call that common sense.
It's just not imaginable that he would have done anything like that outside of the context of Occupy.
Economic disparity, class struggle. These are terms that Americans traditionally shied away from. But the Occupy movement knows that it needs to be more than about a change in language.
We can either settle for a country where a shrinking number of people do really well, while a growing number of Americans barely get by.
I think the big concern is that the Democratic Party is going to try to co-opt this movement. It's going to try to co-opt the ideas and co-opt some of the terminology without co-opting the underlying spirit or co-opting the need for fundamental transformation.
Where we can restore an economy where everyone gets a fair shot and everyone does their fair share and everyone plays by the same set of rules.
In an election year, Occupy Wall Street is fearful that a desire for systemic change could be buried by a billion-dollar presidential campaign. That the anger at inequality in America will be directed into getting out the vote.
It's not the elected politicians that have the power. They are puppets. It's their puppet masters that we need to go after. And if you go after the puppet masters, you get change.
The real way we're going to see transformation in society is not by depending on some elected official to do it, but by building such a strong mass movement that the legislative changes will be the result of the movements, will not be the point, will not be the way the movement happens, but will be the natural result, the natural consequence.
Staying outside the process, taking over foreclosed homes, blocking ports, acts of civil disobedience. That's how Occupy Wall Street feels it can win. The movement's core message has already got through. US politicians now talk regularly about the 99%. After a long winter, which saw most of its encampments cleared and much of the media attention turn elsewhere, Occupy actions are ramping up once again. They're taking credit for forcing the G8 summit to change venue. A general strike is planned in May, and they're aiming to shut down both the Republican and Democratic conventions. They say that the movement is still very much alive, and that what America has seen so far is just the beginning.
It will show up in April, it will show up in March, it will show up on election day.
I think spring is going to be completely volatile. I think we're going to see numbers come out that we haven't seen before.
Because the economic, political, and social conditions continue to deteriorate. And human beings just, it doesn't matter where you're from or what your history is, you'll always revolt against that.